Faculty of Education. And this is my research proposal. So I thank you for joining me. The title of my research proposal is Changing Practices and Changing Perspectives, Pedagogical Technologists in Schools. What I'll do first is I'll explain my research question, my objectives, then I'll start defining what these things are, because you may not be familiar with maybe some of these terms. And then I'll provide a review of the literature, a catalyst for why I'm doing this stuff. And then I'll go over my research design and methodology, okay? And hopefully that'll take 10 minutes. Let's give it a go. All right, so these are my research questions. The main research question is, how does a pedagogical technologist impact a school's ways of working with and through technology? Again, I'm going to define some of these later on, but I purposely present these to you first. All right? And these are some of the sub-questions that I'll be trying to answer by comparing cases of pedagogical technologists. And these are a few of my deliverables, my objectives, and you can just read those things. I want to explore people, and I want to explore schools. All right? And I think this is important too, developing success criteria for pedagogical technologists in schools. All right, now let's talk about these terms. First of all, what exactly is technology? And we have mental models of what technology is. I think that technology can be any and all ways of doing, even philosophy, language, they're technology. For this study, I find that a bit too broad. A bit too narrow, just tools, like a chair, is technology. But again, this is too narrow because there are many ways to use a chair. You can throw a chair, as they're doing in Greece. Right? You can sit on a chair. All right? Now, what Franklin proposes in The Real World of Technology is technology encompasses a tool and a predisposed way of using that tool. Okay, so all of us can more or less agree that we are sitting at these tables. We're sitting at these tables on chairs. So this is a particular use of technology. All right, and that's the one that I'm carrying into this research. Okay, pedagogical technologist. I created this word. Why? Because this person, this role is new. It's very much not something that's on the landscape. It's emerging, this role in schools. Not in every school, only certain schools. That's why I use this word. When you were listening to Diana Lorillard speaking, she used the pedagogical technologist. She used this word like, I think, some kind of technologist, something. Like at the end of her presentation, she mentioned the pedagogical technologist, but she just used a different term to describe the pedagogical technologist. I'll be very concise. A pedagogical technologist is not a teacher. The pedagogical technologist is a full-time staff member in a school whose primary duty is to support the pedagogical aspect of teaching through IT. So the pedagogical technologist is not a teacher, and the pedagogical technologist is not a technician either. This person is not supporting the technical aspect of teaching through IT, but supporting the pedagogical aspect of teaching through IT. All right? Ways of working with and through technology. I purposely made this a bit broad. Originally, I was thinking about just teaching through technology, what happens in the classroom using technology. But I realized that the pedagogical technologist, in order to improve teaching through technology in a classroom, has to do a lot more to the school than just go into a classroom and fix something. Because again, where you're dealing with complex systems, there are different ways of doing, including professional development, leadership, policy, that need to be changed such that ultimately the teaching in the classroom through technology is improved. All right, so that's why I use this. That's what is basically encompassed in ways of working with and through technology. Non-mainstream school. I'm dealing with schools in Hong Kong. There are schools that follow a local curriculum. And then there are schools that do not follow local curriculum, And they also have a lot of flexibility in terms of hiring teachers, in terms of finances, in terms of admitting students. These are non-mainstream schools. Three important types are international schools, private independent schools, and DSS schools in Hong Kong. They are considered non-mainstream compared to government and aided schools in terms of what they can and cannot do. Okay? So those are my definitions. Let me talk about the catalyst. Wow. I didn't know pedagogical technologists existed until maybe the fall of 2010. And I was at this conference called 21st Century Learning Conference, and this was held at West Island School in Pok-Fu-Lam nearby. And I met these people, and I'm like, who are you guys? They were not teachers, they were not technicians, they were full-time support staff, pedagogical support staff at these schools. And they came from certain kinds of schools. I mean, this is a bit misleading, but again, they came from certain types of schools. They didn't just come from any random school in Hong Kong. They came from certain schools in Hong Kong. And what's more, it seemed like these people had certain personality types. And that was very, very telling. Because one critical incident, in my understanding, was we were just on a bus. Right? And you know how when you just ride a bus, it's not like you just start talking to the people next to you, right? Especially if you don't know them. But this one person, a pedagogical technologist from like Singapore, a non-mainstream school there, was asking about like using e-portfolios, how to best deploy e-portfolios in a certain context. And then all of a sudden, all of these people just started chipping in. And that was very special. These people were heretofore strangers, yet they started talking to each other. And I thought that was... There was something about that, right? The individual and the school, some kind of interplay there. Let me scroll out. So then I did a little investigation. What's going on in the literature? And the closest that I can come to a pedagogical technologist in literature is the IT coordinator. All right? But the IT coordinator, again, is something very distinct from the pedagogical technologist. Because now you guys might have an idea of the IT coordinator, so does the literature. And generally, the IT coordinator is involved in a lot of technical support, in addition to perhaps pedagogical support. The IT coordinator generally is a teacher first, primarily, and then the area of responsibility is IT coordination. All right? And I got that impression from reading these international studies, as well as some two local studies in international schools, no less. All right? And then, just to triangulate, I thought about my own experience, because I've been an IT coordinator before too. I'd never known about the pedagogical technologist, but I had worked, I'd been teaching for 7 years. I worked at several schools, and at 4 of these schools, well, there should be another one here, but at these places, I was the IT coordinator, all right? And I was primarily a teacher. I was not working to change the system. I did some perfunctory things with pedagogy, one-off things, but mostly I was just helping to answer technical questions and to do this or that, all right? So I was like, okay, well, these guys are new. This is very curious. So, let me talk about some literature and understanding where are these guys coming from, these pedagogical technologists. And we can frame the pedagogical technologist in terms of where a school is at. Not every school, again, can support a pedagogical technologist. Why? Because schools are going through all different levels of change with regard to technology. Some schools may be, for example, using information technology on a limited basis in a school. It may not even be on their radar. Other schools may say, hey, using technology in the classroom, not only in the classroom, but in the entire school, is going to be a focal point for us. All right? So there are different stages of IT integration, not only in teaching and learning, but just in a school's ways of doing. And there are different frameworks. In fact, there's so many frameworks that basically try to describe this process in terms of stages. All right? And a few things that we can kind of collect from examining these frameworks, I just looked at these four, is that there are different ways to respond to technology. Right? You can embrace it, you can be lukewarm to it, you can reject it. And there are also different types of obstacles. Right? Now, it's not just the people, but it's the ways of doing between the people that can be obstacles. And something that I was thinking about before was, okay, this IT coordinator. Can we envision the IT coordinator as someone who can take you from like this step here to this step? Is this person going to bridge certain stages? Or is the IT coordinator someone who's found only at certain levels, certain stages of IT maturity in a school? All right? And you know, I thought it could be either way, but then I was reading about Nikki Davis, and Nikki Davis wrote in 2008 something really important about school change and using an ecological perspective. And she was writing about IT coordinators as being at a certain stage. So we can say that at a certain stage, and she says when ICT use becomes localized, well, it emerges from localized to become systemic, then we see the emergence, a need for an IT coordinator. So at a certain stage, we can see an IT coordinator emerging. But what she doesn't address is what happens when the school moves to another stage, for example. What happens to the IT coordinator then? I was actually talking to one of these pedagogical technologists at the Chinese International School yesterday. And she posed something very, very curious. She said that the pedagogical technologist, the unit of analysis of my study, is going to become extinct. And I was like, wow, this is a very bold claim. I was like, most schools don't even have pedagogical technologists. But she was like, here's the deal. So soon as all of the teachers in the school themselves become innovators and integrators of technology, then you don't need the technologist anymore. The technologist dies. I was like, wow, that is prescient. That requires just like looking far ahead. I mean, she's looking like over here, like beyond. Like right now, all of us, when we think about technology in schools and we're thinking about still IT coordinators, we're still kind of like around here. But she's thinking ahead. Ultimately, you don't need the pedagogical technologist anymore, so as soon as the school is continually evolving and embracing that evolution. So I was like, okay, great. All right, before I get to my conceptual framework, let's talk about the ecological metaphor. It is a great way to explain change and innovation in schools. All right, and there have been some seminal works by John Frank, again, Davis, and Nancy Law and Bob and Alan just wrote a book using the ecological metaphor as well. And it's, again, a good way to understand technology use and innovation. And again, while it's not totally applicable, we can borrow some ideas that schools are comprised of species, teachers, principals, innovative pedagogical practices, traditional pedagogical practices. All right, there are different species, and some are organic, and some are not organic. All right, some can breathe, some cannot breathe. All right. In addition, there are keystone species, species that are endemic and important to the environment, such as teachers. You can't have a school ecology without teachers for the time being. All right? Then there are invasive species, such as innovative pedagogical practices. So a lot of these, in these studies, the innovative pedagogical practice is the invasive species, something new that's coming to replace the traditional species, the traditional pedagogical practice. We can consider the pedagogical technologist to be an invasive species. All right? And again, these species cooperate and they also compete against each other. All right? So for example, a pedagogical technologist needs to cooperate with the teachers. So they're cooperating, these species, whereas maybe traditional versus innovative pedagogical practices, these are competing species. They are in interdependent and nested ecologies. A school is more than a school. A school is placed within a community, within a nation, within this world. All right, and they all have, they're permeous, so they can influence each other. What happens in one ecology, one level, can affect another level. And there's carrying capacity in farming. The idea that certain schools, again, can only support certain types of species. So a school that perhaps is very conservative in its ways can only perhaps support traditional pedagogical practice. They can't even support an IT coordinator at this point because all the pedagogical practice is traditional and it's localized. It hasn't been scaled up yet. All right, so there's carrying capacity in schools, in ecologies. And farming. The idea that you can introduce something into an ecology. All right? But that, again, as Nancy Law writes, it's a painstaking process. You have to be very, very careful because in some instances you introduce something into an environment and it dies. You introduce a new colleague to the school, colleague leaves. All right? Okay, let's get to the framework. This is my conceptual framework. This is a two-tier nested ecology. There is a global ecology and then there's a school ecology. I created these two ecologies, and this is specific for non-mainstream schools in Hong Kong. Why? Because Hong Kong is not a state. No, Hong Kong is a state, but it's not a nation. And it has very little influence, heavy-handedness, on a non-mainstream school, on an international school, for example. The international school has a lot of power, a lot of flexibility, right? The government's, in fact, just a minor player, right, compared to its role in aided in government schools. And we can see that the people in the schools, including the teachers and maybe the parents and the students and everyone, they tend to have more of a global outlook. They come from abroad. They come from the nations. They don't necessarily come from Hong Kong. That's why I don't include a Hong Kong ecology. All right? Okay, so we can see different kinds of species at the global level. These are institutions. The state, you see businesses, professional organizations, educational institutions, the community. They affect this school, which is also a species in the globe. So we can see at the global level we have institutional species. Now, within the school, I include biotic species and abiotic species. Biotic species, principal parents, these guys, and the pedagogical technologists. Right? This is one biotic species within the school. And then environing them are the abiotic species, the ways of doing in a school. And the ones that I think are important for this study include professional development, and what else do we have here? Teaching through IT, relationships, shared vision, and I culled these from the literature on school change through technology, policies, infrastructure, and leadership. Okay, so I consider these abiotic species, and they work with the biotic species, including pedagogical technologists, and in some, you get a school. All right. Now, what else interests me besides these species at the global and school levels is the individual himself, all right, the pedagogical technologist. How does this guy influence the school's ways of doing through technology just because of who the person is, all right, regardless of the environment? So I was looking at certain indicators, and I took this from a lot of instructional designer literature, because there really isn't a lot of literature on personalities, cases of IT coordinators or instructional designers. So I had to read a lot about who these people are, and I developed these internal indicators of how the pedagogical technologist impacts a school's ways of doing, including disposition, professional role, philosophy, values, beliefs, and assumptions, professional experience, goals, and vision, and of course, most importantly, TPAC, all right, technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge. So, in sum, this is how I understand how the pedagogical technologist, because of these things, because of the interaction between the pedagogical technologist and these species, ultimately impacts these ways of working with and through technology. That's my research question. Okay, let me quickly move. Okay, research design and methodology. This is going to be qualitative research, case study research. Again, I've read Yin and Merriam and Stake, and this is useful when studying educational innovations, pedagogical technologist in schools being an innovation, and the boundaries between the phenomenon and context are not clearly evident. That's right. You can't necessarily study the pedagogical technologist in a vacuum, right? As we established, definitely very context specific for the emergence of this kind of role. Descriptive and heuristic. Okay. Multiple case studies. I consider them instrumental. That is, the sum of all of these case studies can provide a means to support a theory about pedagogical technologists. Replication logic. We can consider each of these cases in my research a separate experiment to support the theory. Analytical generalization versus statistical generalization. I have 4 cases. I cannot make a generalization about a population or a universe. I cannot. Right? It's not statistical generalization, but what multiple case studies and qualitative research are good for is analytical generalization, again, supporting theory building. Okay? Sampling, opportunity for learning. I have 4 guys. Curiously, one of them dropped out, but thankfully I met another one yesterday. All right. Curiously, one of the schools I wanted to study, in fact, are not. Let me say, how do I explain this? The pedagogical technologist in the school has left, but the school is choosing not to replace the pedagogical technologist. So I was like, okay, I cannot save this school anymore. But I did find someone else to study. All right, balance with variety. I have some people who are insiders in the school, some people who are outsiders in the school, some people who are in charge of just one section, primary section, someone who's in charge of both sections, primary and secondary section. Hopefully I can get the guy in the ESF who's in charge of several schools. So there's balance with variety, just minor adjustments in each experiment. All right? And the schools, likewise, they are non-mainstream schools. So on the one hand, they may face similar environments. I mean, these schools being in Hong Kong, maybe their community might be similar, the people they deal with might be similar, yet there's still difference in the way schools do things. Some might be like Chinese International, using a very unique Chinese and English approach to education. It might be German-Swiss, where you have a German stream and like an international stream. So there's some differences in these schools as well. Okay. Data collection, methods, instrumentation. I'm going to be interviewing these guys. I'm going to be observing them at work. I'm going to be interviewing principals and colleagues. I'm going to be observing lessons and taking field notes, taking photographs, and reviewing documents. Finally, I'm going to take a grounded approach to analyzing this data. Types of validity. I'm going to, of course, be comparing the data that I have within each case to make sure that there is some kind of consensus meaning in the data, and then between multiple cases to make sure, again, that it supports one theory. And I think that's about it. Yeah, that's it. Wow. Great. Any questions? Jing Jing.
It's just to, I think I read a lot about learning technologists. I'm just wondering whether you will kind of mention that term in your thesis, or you're just going to adopt pedagogical technologist. Also, another question is, when you choose to study these people, how do you identify them as pedagogical technologists? Is that your thesis? You're going to show actually those people whose roles are in these, and then you can call them pedagogical technologists, or you identify them as a school saying these are pedagogical technologists.
Well, for my study, I defined the pedagogical technologist as full-time pedagogical support for a school. So this person, again, is neither a technician nor a teacher. And they have different titles, right? You mentioned the learning technologist. Did Diana Lorillard use that term?
In the UK, people generally call these people learning technologists.
Yeah.
It's a common term.
Here there are different terms as well. ICT curriculum leader, and there was like something else we used in California, some other term. This guy commented on my YouTube video. It's like, this is what we call in California. I was like, okay, sure. But I'm just using this term, and again, I keep it purposely vague, just so it creates a sense that this is something new. You don't really have a mental model of it, so I can construct it for you. But do you think it's worthwhile for me to mention that?
I didn't think about very deeply, but I just thought you might got yourself into a circle. So whether you start with this term or you end up with this term, so you might if you actually identify someone who is doing this kind of job, and then from your findings you could say actually they are pedagogical technologists who is generally conducive to learning activities when they deal with technologies at the schools, or you should start with this term saying those are the type of people we need, and then trying to kind of differentiate them from other technicians and teachers. So I'm not sure myself as well. I just thought from the presentation as that you might need to find your position at the beginning of your research.
Thank you. I think I started from the former. I found these guys first, and I was like, who are these guys? And I just started hanging out with them, and again, the curious thing is that they're part of this kind of tight-knit group. They're clubby. And I was like, okay, so who are these guys? These guys are special. And I was like, okay, what do they have in common? And once I figured out what do they have in common, then I was like, okay, now we have grounds for something special, some kind of research. These are special ones. In their context and who these people are to be successful in where they are as well. Any other questions? Thanks, guys. We finished on time, right? Yeah. Yes! This is better than last time.